The crystalline spires of Thorian Prime pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces refracting the light of 3 suns into rainbow cascades. Captain Sarah Chen stood at her shuttle's viewport, breath caught in her throat. After 6 months in cryo-sleep, she was the first human to see this world up close. She was also possibly the last, if she failed. Final approach clearance granted, the shuttle's AI announced. Thorian Control advises minimal deviation from designated flight path. Sarah checked her environmental suit's seals one final time. The Thorian's atmosphere wasn't toxic, but its unique mineral composition could trigger severe allergic reactions in humans. She couldn't afford any mistakes, not when she was humanity's last chance at preventing a war. The previous 3 diplomatic missions had ended in disaster. The first team had been too aggressive, treating the Thorians like any other species. They'd been expelled within hours. The second team had been too cautious, offending the Thorians with what they perceived as weakness. The third, Sarah pushed away memories of the footage. Suffice to say, no one had expected 9-foot crystalline beings to move that fast. Her shuttle touched down on a landing pad that seemed to grow from the crystal city itself. Through the viewport, she could see her welcoming committee. 3 Thorians, their crystalline bodies catching the light in ways that made her eyes hurt. The tallest one, easily reaching 12 feet, had a core that pulsed with deep purple energy. Captain Chen, the shuttle AI interrupted her observations. Your vital signs indicate elevated stress levels. Would you like a final dose of calming agents? Sarah shook her head. No. I need to be clear-headed for this. She stood, squaring her shoulders. They need to see me, not some chemically altered version. The airlock cycled, and Sarah stepped onto Thorian soil. The crystal beneath her boots hummed with subtle vibrations, and she could feel it through her suit. A living world, far more organic than its appearance suggested. The tallest Thorian stepped forward, its voice resonating through her suit's receivers in harmonious tones. I am First Resonator Cathor. You stand before us alone, human. Explain. Sarah had practiced this moment countless times, but standing before beings that looked like living gemstones made her rehearsed speeches feel hollow. Instead, she went with instinct. Because we've been doing this wrong, she said, keeping her voice steady. We keep treating this like a traditional diplomatic mission, sending teams with protocols and procedures. But you're not traditional, are you? You're unique, special. And special situations require special approaches. The crystal beings shifted, their surfaces catching light in new patterns. Sarah continued, heart pounding but voice unwavering. I came alone because I want to learn. Really learn. Not just exchange pleasantries and sign treaties, but understand who you are. What makes your world pulse with life? Why your cities sing with harmonies we can barely comprehend. Thor's core pulsed brighter. Pretty words, human. We have heard pretty words before. Sarah reached up, disengaging her helmet's seal. The other Thorians shifted, crystalline forms creating a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Even Cathor's steady glow flickered. What are you doing? Thor demanded. Showing trust, Sarah said, removing her helmet completely. The alien air hit her lungs, sharp and clean, carrying scents of mineral and ozone. Your atmosphere isn't lethal to us. Uncomfortable, yes. Potentially dangerous over long exposure. Absolutely. But I'm willing to accept that discomfort to show you I'm serious. Her lungs burned slightly, and her eyes watered, but she kept her gaze locked on Cathor's central core. The Thorian leader studied her for long moments, its crystalline form shifting through colors she had no names for. Finally, Cathor spoke again. In all our encounters with your kind, none have shown such reckless sincerity. The words should have been critical, but Sarah caught something else in the harmonic overtones. Interest. Different approach, remember. Sarah managed a smile despite the growing discomfort in her chest. Though if you don't mind, I should probably put this back on now. Making a point is good, but passing out would be counterproductive. As she resealed her helmet, She heard something she hadn't expected. The musical sound of Thorian laughter, their crystalline forms vibrating in complex harmonies. "Come then, reckless human," Cathor said, gesturing toward the towering crystal spires. "Let us see if your different approach yields different results. Though I warn you, our patience is not infinite, and the consequences of failure remain severe." Sarah fell into step beside the towering being, noting how its crystal surface seemed to ripple like liquid glass despite its apparent solidity. "That's fair, though I should warn you too. Humans can be surprisingly hard to get rid of once we set our minds to something." As they walked toward the crystal city, Sarah felt the vibrations through her boots change tone, becoming something almost welcoming. She passed the first test, but she knew harder ones lay ahead. The fate of 2 species might rest on her shoulders, but for now, she focused on something simpler, learning to walk in step with a being made of living crystal. The real challenges would come soon enough. For now, she had achieved what no human had managed before, a genuine conversation with a Thorian. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And sometimes, starts were all you needed to change everything. The grand archive of Thorian Prime stretched upward for what seemed like miles, its crystalline shelves holding not books or data tablets, but singing crystals, each one containing millennia of history in resonant frequencies. Sarah stood beside Cathor, watching in amazement as a young Thorian archivist literally merged with one of the crystals, their form temporarily becoming one with the historical record. "Your fascination is unexpected," Cathor observed, the purple energy in their core pulsing steadily. "Most species find our methods primitive compared to their digital systems." "Primitive?" Sarah shook her head, her environmental suit's sensors struggling to process the complex harmonies filling the air. "This is anything but primitive. You're not just storing information, you're living it." 3 days had passed since her arrival, and each moment had brought new wonders. The Thorians didn't just build their cities, they grew them. Their technology wasn't separate from their bodies, but an extension of their crystalline forms. Yet beneath the beauty, Sarah had begun to notice troubling signs. "The resonance is weaker here," she said, gesturing to a section of the archive that seemed dimmer than the rest. It wasn't just her imagination. The crystals in this area barely hummed compared to the singing brilliance of the others. Thor's form stiffened, light patterns shifting to darker hues. "You are more observant than your predecessors, Captain Chen. Perhaps too observant. Or perhaps observant enough to help," she countered, turning to face the towering being. "Something's wrong, isn't it? The degradation. It's not just in these archives. I've seen it in the outer districts, in the younger Thorians. Your people are losing their resonance." The massive chamber fell silent, even the archivists pausing in their work. Thor's core flickered with colors Sarah had never seen before, emotions her human eyes couldn't fully comprehend. "You overstep, human," Cathor's voice carried harmonics of warning. But Sarah stood her ground. "Do I? You allowed this mission when you could have refused it. You've shown me your most sacred places, taught me about your history. Why? Because you're desperate. Because whatever's happening to your people, you can't solve it alone." The silence stretched longer, broken only by the faint singing of the healthy crystals. Finally, Cathor moved closer, their massive form looming over Sarah. "Follow me," they commanded, leading her deeper into the archive, past sections that grew progressively darker and quieter. They stopped before a massive crystalline door that looked ancient, its surface clouded and dark. "What you see here must never leave this chamber," Cathor said, placing their hand against the door. It resonated briefly before splitting open, revealing a sight that made Sarah's breath catch. Inside lay hundreds of young Thorians, their usually brilliant forms dulled and silent. Some were barely visible, their crystalline bodies becoming transparent. "The resonance decay," Cathor explained, their voice heavy with harmonics of grief. "It began 3 generations ago. Subtle at first, a weakening of the harmonic bonds that connect us to our world and each other. We thought we could solve it through traditional methods, using the ancient frequencies stored in our archives, but the decay accelerates with each generation. Sarah moved closer to one of the young Thorians, her suit's sensors recording the faint, erratic pulses of their core. How long? Without intervention, 2 generations, perhaps less. Our children are being born with weaker resonance patterns. Many fade to nothing within their first cycle. We are not just losing our history, Captain Chen. We are losing our future. Sarah turned back to Cathor, her mind racing. This is why you really allowed me here. Not for diplomatic relations or trade agreements. You need help. The question. Cathor's form shifted, creating patterns that spoke of both hope and threat, is whether your people can provide that help. And more importantly, whether they can be trusted with the knowledge of our weakness. Sarah met the Thorian's gaze steadily. I won't lie to you. There are humans who would see this as an opportunity to exploit. But there are also humans who would work tirelessly to help, who would see your children suffering and move mountains to end it. She gestured to the fading young Thorians. Let me contact our xenobiologists, our resonance specialists. We've been studying crystalline structures for centuries. Different applications, yes, but the principles might. No. Cathor interrupted sharply. No teams. No specialists. No armies of researchers treating our children like specimens. Their form towered over Sarah, core pulsing with intense energy. You, Captain Chen. Only you. Sarah blinked in surprise. Me. I'm not a scientist. I'm barely keeping up with understanding your basic social structures, let alone. You see us. Cathor cut in. Not as specimens, not as potential allies or enemies, but as people. You noticed our children's suffering before we revealed it. You understood our archives were more than simple data storage. They paused, their crystalline form shifting to create a pattern Sarah had never seen before. You removed your helmet on that first day, choosing trust over safety. Sarah looked around the chamber, at the dying young Thorians, at the ancient archives holding countless generations of knowledge, at Cathor's quietly desperate form. Okay, she said finally, but I'll need access to human medical databases and secure communication with at least one xenobiologist, someone I trust completely. No teams, no research squads, but I can't do this entirely alone. Cathor was silent for a long moment, their form shifting through various patterns before settling. 1. And they must never know the full scope of what they're helping with. The moment this becomes official human knowledge. It won't, Sarah promised. But we will find a way to help your people, whatever it takes. As they left the chamber, Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. She had no idea how to save a dying race of crystalline beings, but she knew who might. Her sister, Dr. Maya Chen, the leading researcher in crystalline computing and quantum resonance theory. Now she just had to figure out how to explain everything without actually explaining anything. And more importantly, how to keep her promise to save a species while keeping their greatest vulnerability secret from her own kind. The weight of crystal spires above her had never felt heavier. The resonance patterns are fascinating, Sarah, but what aren't you telling me? Dr. Maya Chen's hologram flickered in the secure communication chamber, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. These readings, they're not just scientific research, are they? Sarah glanced at Cathor, who stood just outside the hologram's pickup range, their crystalline form dimmed to avoid detection. Just focus on the harmonic degradation patterns, Maya. Can you identify what's causing the decay? Maya sighed, her hands moving through the air as she manipulated data only she could see. It's like nothing I've ever encountered. The crystalline structures are losing coherence at the quantum level, but the pattern isn't random. It's almost like... She paused, eyes widening. Sarah, these aren't just sample readings, are they? These are from living beings. Before Sarah could respond, the transmission crackled with interference. Thor stepped forward, their form radiating concern. We must end this transmission. Now. Wait. Maya's voice cut through the static. The degradation. It's not natural. Someone's doing this deliberately. Sarah, whoever these readings are from, they're being attacked at a quantum level. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the chamber in darkness save for Cthor's pulsing core. Sarah turned to the Thorian, her heart racing. Is she right? Is someone causing this? Thor's form shifted through dark, turbulent patterns. We suspected, but confirmation was beyond our capabilities. Our enemies are more cunning than we imagined. Enemies. Sarah stepped closer. What enemies? You never mentioned. Because they do not officially exist. Cthor interrupted, their voice carrying harmonics of ancient pain. The Shade Collective. Crystalline beings like us, but twisted, corrupted. They broke away from our society millennia ago, choosing to feed on resonance rather than generate it. Sarah's mind raced with implications. They're not just killing your people, they're feeding on them. On your children. Yes. Cthor's form dimmed further. They hide in the dark spaces between stars, striking without warning, corrupting our resonance patterns to create more of their kind. We thought our defenses would protect the younger generations, but they found a way through. Sarah finished. A quantum-level attack that bypasses your traditional defenses. She began pacing, her scientist sister's words mixing with everything she'd learned about Thorian society. That's why you really let me stay. Not just to help find a cure, but because humans might have the key to fighting back. Cthor's core pulsed with confirmation. Your species' understanding of quantum mechanics differs from ours. You approach it through technology rather than natural resonance. We hoped that we might see something you couldn't. Sarah nodded. Maya already has. But Cthor, I have to tell her the truth. All of it. She can't help develop a defense against an enemy she doesn't know exists. The Council will never agree. Then don't tell them. Sarah stood her ground. My sister is the best quantum physicist Earth has. She's also the most stubborn, dedicated person I know. She won't stop until she understands what's happening, with or without official approval. Cthor was silent for long moments, their crystalline form shifting through complex patterns. Finally, they spoke. The council chamber. 1 hour. Bring your sister's hologram. But Sarah, their form loomed larger. If this goes wrong, both our species will suffer the consequences. An hour later, Sarah stood before the Thorian High Council, Maya's hologram beside her, as Cthor revealed the full truth of their species' fight for survival. The council chamber's crystals sang with tension as Maya's expression shifted from shock to determination. A quantum virus, Maya said finally, her holographic hands moving through complex equations. They're using your own resonance patterns against you, creating a cascading failure that corrupts your natural frequencies. But if we combine human quantum shielding technology with your resonance abilities, it would need to be tested. One council member objected. The risk of exposure. I'll do it. Cthor stepped forward. I will be the first test subject. The council erupted in harmonious objection, but Cthor's core pulsed with unwavering determination. I brought the human here. I vouched for her. I will bear the risk. Sarah moved to stand beside the towering crystalline being. We'll do it together. Maya's shielding technology will be calibrated to my biological readings first. Once we prove it's safe for organic life, we'll adapt it for Thorian physiology. Maya's hologram nodded. I'll need 2 days to modify the quantum shield prototypes. Sarah, you'll have to act as my hands there. Every adjustment, every calibration will have to be perfect. As the council debated, Sarah looked up at Cthor. You didn't tell me everything at first. About the Shade Collective, about the real reason you let me stay. No. Cthor admitted, their core pulsing softly. But you proved worthy of the truth. You proved worthy of trust. Sarah smiled slightly. Well then, let's prove worthy of hope too. Maya, start the calculations. We got a species to save and some quantum vampires to stop. The crystals of the council chamber sang with new frequencies. Fear, hope, determination all mixing together in harmonies that would have been impossible weeks ago. The real work was just beginning, and with it, the real danger. But as Sarah looked between her sister's determined hologram and Cthor's steadfast form, she knew they had a chance. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs came not from technology or power, but from trust, from being willing to share weakness and find strength together. The shadows between the stars might be waiting, but they would soon learn that they weren't the only ones who could adapt and evolve. The laboratory deep within Thorian Prime hummed with nervous energy as Sarah made the final adjustments to the quantum shield prototype. Through the secure holographic link, Maya watched every movement with intense focus. Connection to crystal matrix stable, Sarah reported, her hands steady despite the pressure. Quantum field generator responding to initial harmonics. Good, Maya nodded. Now for the hard part. Cthor, are you ready? The massive crystalline being stepped forward, their usually brilliant form deliberately dimmed to minimal resonance. I am prepared. Though I must admit, connecting my core to human technology is unsettling. Sarah looked up at her friend. And yes, somewhere along the way, the towering alien had become exactly that. We've triple-checked everything. The shield will protect you from quantum-level attacks while allowing your natural resonance to flow freely. In theory, Cthor noted dryly, their core pulsing with what Sarah now recognized as nervous humor. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. The crystal walls around them pulsed with warning frequencies, and Sarah's suit sensors screamed with quantum distortions. They're here. Cthor's voice carried harmonics of ancient hatred. The Shade Collective. They must have detected our preparations. Through the laboratory's crystal walls, Sarah watched in horror as dark shapes moved through the city's lower levels. Unlike the brilliant, geometric forms of the Thorians, these beings were jagged, their crystalline bodies absorbing light rather than refracting it. Where they passed, the city's living crystal dimmed. Sarah, Maya's hologram flickered with urgency. The shield isn't ready for full implementation. We needed hours more for final calibration. We don't have hours, Sarah's mind raced. Thor, how long before they reach the youth chambers? Minutes. Our warriors will slow them, but against quantum corruption. The massive being moved toward the door. I must join the defense. Wait. Sarah grabbed the toolkit containing the prototype. Take me with you. Absolutely not. Both Cthor and Maya spoke simultaneously. The shield needs to be calibrated during use, Sarah argued, already checking her suit's seals. And I'm not letting you face them alone. Cthor's form shifted with conflict, but another alarm made the decision for them. Stay close. If I tell you to run, I won't. Sarah. Cthor's core pulsed with intensity. You must. If I fall to their corruption, I will not be able to stop myself from attacking you. Promise me. Sarah met the crystalline being's gaze. I promise to stay alive. That's all you get. Now move. They raced through the crystal corridors, passing Thorian warriors whose forms blazed with combat resonance. The closer they got to the lower levels, the colder the air became, and Sarah's suit sensors registered increasing quantum distortions. They found the first victims near the archive entrance. Thorian guards whose once brilliant forms had turned dark and brittle. They weren't dead, Sarah realized with horror. Their resonance had been corrupted, twisted into something that hurt to look at. Through here, Cthor led them down a maintenance shaft. We can reach the youth chambers before. A dark form burst through the wall, its jagged crystalline body seeming to drink in the light around it. Sarah's suit sensors shrieked as quantum distortions filled the air. Behind me, Cthor's form blazed with protective resonance, meeting the Shade's attack with a burst of pure harmonic energy. Sarah didn't waste time arguing. She pulled out the prototype, fingers flying over its controls. Maya. Emergency calibration sequence. Sarah, without proper testing. Now, Maya. The Shade creature threw Cthor back, their massive form crashing into the crystal wall. As it turned toward Sarah, she saw its core, a void of anti-resonance that seemed to pull at her very atoms. Shield activating. Maya's voice cut through the chaos. Sarah, you have to. Time seemed to slow as Sarah made her decision. Instead of backing away, she lunged forward, slapping the prototype directly onto Cthor's core. Full power. Connect to primary resonance. The prototype hummed to life, creating a quantum field that merged with Cthor's natural frequencies. The Thorian's form blazed with new energy, patterns of light and technology interweaving in ways neither species had seen before. The shade creature hesitated, its void-like core fluctuating with what might have been surprise. Cthor rose, their enhanced form now pulsing with both traditional resonance and quantum-shielded harmonics. Clever, the shade's voice was wrong, a corruption of the musical Thorian speech. But you cannot shield them all. Watch us. Sarah stepped up beside Cthor, her suit's sensors adapting to provide real-time data to the shield. Maya, are you seeing this? Every bit. Her sister's voice was tight with concentration. The shield is holding, but it's creating new resonance patterns. Cthor, can you? The shade attacked, its form dissolving into quantum-level strikes meant to corrupt and consume. But where its anti-resonance met Cthor's shielded form, something new happened. The corruption couldn't take hold. More than that, the shield was reflecting the attack, forcing the shade to maintain solid form. It's working. Sarah's fingers flew over her datapad, adjusting frequencies. Cthor, now. The massive Thorian struck, their enhanced resonance tearing through the shade's defenses. The dark crystal being screamed, a sound like breaking glass and corrupted data, before its form shattered completely. But there was no time to celebrate. More dark shapes were moving through the corridors below, heading for the youth chambers. The prototype works. Sarah was already pulling out backup components. We can replicate it. Quickly. Thor's shielded form hummed with new purpose. How many can you make? Enough. Sarah met their gaze. Enough to remind these shadows why they should fear the light. Together, they raced toward the youth chambers, carrying hope in the form of quantum shields and combined knowledge. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time since the resonance decay began, it was a battle the Thorians might actually win. Sometimes the darkest threats could only be fought by bringing different lights together. The aftermath of battle left Thorian Prime transformed. Crystal spires that had once sung with pure resonance now hummed with the combined harmonics of Thorian energy and human quantum technology. In the Great Council Chamber, Sarah stood beside Cthor, watching as young Thorians played with their newly stabilized forms, their cores protected by miniaturized versions of the quantum shield. They're adapting faster than we expected, Maya's hologram noted, studying the data streams. The shields aren't just protecting them, they're helping them develop new resonance patterns. Evolution through necessity. Cthor's shielded form pulsed with pride and wonder. Our children will grow up stronger than we ever were. Different, but stronger. The last week had been a blur of activity. After defeating the first shade attackers, Sarah and Cthor had led the defense of the youth chambers, distributing quantum shields to every young Thorian they could reach. The Shade Collective, facing unexpected resistance, had retreated to the darkness between stars, but not before suffering heavy losses. They'll be back, Sarah said quietly, watching a young Thorian experiment with generating quantum-enhanced resonance patterns. The collective won't give up just because we surprised them once. No, Cthor agreed, but we will be ready. Already our warriors learned to incorporate your quantum shielding into their combat techniques, and your sister's latest modifications allow us to track quantum distortions across vast distances. Speaking of which, Maya's hologram flickered with excitement. The latest scans show something fascinating. The quantum shields aren't just protecting Thorian resonance, they're amplifying it, creating new frequencies that shouldn't be possible. Sarah moved closer to one of the chamber's walls, placing her hand against the living crystal. Even through her suit, she could feel the difference, a harmony of technologies and natural energies working together in ways neither species had imagined possible. The Council has reached a decision, Thor announced, their form shifting to formal patterns. We will no longer hide in shadows, protecting our weakness. The time has come for true alliance between our peoples. The human governments won't all agree, Sarah warned. Some will see your technology as a threat. Others will want to exploit it. Let them try. Thor's core pulsed with amusement. They will find, as the Shade Collective did, that we are no longer vulnerable. Thanks to you, Sarah Chen, we are stronger than ever. Not thanks to me. Sarah shook her head. Thanks to trust. On both sides. Maya's hologram smiled. And speaking of trust, wait until you see what Thor and I have been working on. Show her. Thor moved to the chamber center, their massive form beginning to pulse with new energy patterns. The quantum shield surrounding their core sparked with intense activity, and suddenly the air itself seemed to crystallize around them. We call it the resonance bridge, Maya explained as Sarah watched in amazement. A quantum crystalline network that could connect our worlds, allow instant communication and transport across any distance. Powered by the combined energy of both our technologies. Thor added, their form now at the center of a growing crystal lattice that hummed with both Thorian resonance and quantum energy. A true joining of our species' strengths. Sarah walked through the crystallizing air, marveling at how it responded to her presence, creating paths and patterns that merged human and Thorian aesthetics. It's beautiful, she breathed. But more than that, it's hope. Indeed, Thor's voice carried new harmonics, joy, pride, and something deeper. The Shade Collective sought to destroy us by corrupting our connection to the universe. Instead, they drove us to forge new connections, stronger than ever before. A group of young Thorians approached, their shielded forms experimenting with the crystal lattice, creating shapes and patterns that would have been impossible weeks ago. One of them, barely tall enough to reach Sarah's shoulder, generated a perfect replica of Earth's solar system in crystalline form. We have much to learn from each other, Thor observed. And now, thanks to the resonance bridge, we have all the time we need to learn it. Maya's hologram flickered with new data. The quantum stability readings are off the charts. This network could span galaxies, create instant connections between any worlds that join it. A crystal web among the stars, Sarah mused, watching the young Thorians play. Connecting worlds, protecting them, helping them grow together. And you, Sarah Chen. Thor turned to her, their core pulsing with question. Will you stay to help us build it? Sarah looked around the chamber, at the merging of two technologies, at the young Thorians learning to use their new abilities, at her sister's excited hologram taking readings of everything. She thought of the darkness between stars, of the shadows that still waited out there, and of the light they could create together. Try to stop me, she smiled, reaching up to remove her helmet completely. The air, now infused with quantum crystalline energy, felt like breathing in starlight. Above them, the crystal spires of Thorian Prime sang with new harmonies, not just the pure notes of Thorian resonance or the precise frequencies of human quantum physics, but a symphony of both, creating music that would echo across galaxies. The Shade Collective had sought to feed on weakness, but they had instead revealed a greater truth, that the strongest bonds weren't forged by power or fear, but by trust, by the willingness to reach across the darkness and help others shine brighter. As Sarah watched the young Thorians play with their new abilities, she realized that this wasn't just a victory over an enemy. It was the beginning of something far greater, a future where the light between stars grew stronger than the darkness could ever be. And it had all started with one human soldier being willing to take off her helmet and trust in something bigger than herself.